The red dust of Mars had a way of getting into everything. Lyra Vex learned this during her first week at the Meridian Research Station, when she found the crimson powder in her coffee between the pages of her notebooks and somehow inside her sealed equipment cases. Now, 3 years later, she barely noticed it anymore. What she did notice was the readings on her quantum field detector going absolutely insane. "This can't be right," she whispered, her breath fogging in the cold observation dome. The numbers cascading across her screen defied every law of physics she'd spent her life studying. Space-time itself was tearing open, right there in the middle of her lab, exactly 7 feet above the titanium floor. The air shimmered, reality folded inward like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. And then, he was there. He wasn't standing, he wasn't floating. He simply existed in that space where the universe had split itself open. His form shifted constantly, like watching someone through water, never quite solid, never quite transparent. Colors that had no names in human language rippled across what might have been his skin. Where his eyes should be, they were pools of liquid starlight. Lyra did what any rational scientist would do. She grabbed her tablet and started recording. Spatial coordinates, 47.2 by 109.6. Time, 0347 Station Standard. Subject appears to be alive? Conscious. Difficult to determine physical parameters when subject exists in what seems to be multiple quantum states simultaneously. The being turned toward her. She felt his attention like a physical weight pressing against her mind. And then, impossibly, she heard words, not through her ears, through something deeper. "I am lost." His voice resonated in frequencies that made her bones ache and her heart race. It was beautiful and terrible, like hearing the birth cry of a star. Lyra lowered her tablet slowly. Her scientific training screamed at her to maintain objectivity, to document, to analyze. But something else, something more fundamental, made her take a step forward instead of back. "Where are you from?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A place that has no location in your understanding. We call it Velshara, the Lightborn realm. I am Zephirin'kael, though your language fractures my name. I'll call you Zeph," and surprised herself by almost smiling, if that's okay. The colors rippling across his form shifted to something warmer. If beings made of living energy could smile, she thought he might be doing exactly that. "Zeph," he repeated, and the way he said it made it sound like music. "Yes, that is acceptable." "How did you get here?" "There was a storm in the fabric between worlds. I was traveling through the void currents when reality itself convulsed. The pathways collapsed. I fell through dimensions I did not know existed, and then I was here, in your solid world, your fixed and frozen place." Lyra glanced at her instruments. The quantum readings were still chaotic, but they'd stabilized into a pattern. Whatever rift had brought him here wasn't closing, but it wasn't expanding either. It was waiting. For what, she couldn't say. "Can you get back?" she asked. "I do not know. My people, they cannot exist in physical dimensions for long. Your reality is too dense, too heavy. It crushes us. Already I can feel your universe pressing against me, trying to force me into a single state of being. If I cannot return soon." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Then we'll figure out how to send you home," Lyra said with more confidence than she felt. "I study dimensional anomalies, tears in space-time. If anyone in this sector can help you, it's me." "Why would you help me? I am alien to everything you know." Lyra thought about that for a moment, looking at this impossible being who had fallen into her lab from another plane of existence. She thought about the loneliness of Mars, about being millions of miles from Earth and what it meant to be displaced from everything familiar. "Because I know what it's like to be far from home," she said finally, "and because no one should have to face that alone." The colors around Zeph shifted again, pulsing in a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. "You are unusual for your kind, Lyra Vex. I have observed humans. They fear what they do not understand. They destroy it." "Some do," Lyra admitted, "but not all. Some of us see something unknown and beautiful, and we want to understand it. We want to preserve it." She moved to her workstation and began pulling up her research. Years of data on spatial rifts, quantum tunneling, dimensional membrane theory. If there was an answer somewhere in all this information, she would find it. "It will take time," she said more to herself than to him. "Weeks, maybe months. You'll need to stay here in the lab. It's shielded from most scanners. If the station authorities find out about you, they'll quarantine you, study you, maybe worse." "I understand. I will remain here in your sanctuary." And so began the strangest partnership in human history. The first few days were clinical, professional. Lyra treated Zeph like any other research subject, maintaining careful distance while she documented every aspect of his existence. She measured his energy output, analyzed the frequency of his light patterns, mapped the quantum field distortions around him. But Zeph was not a passive subject. He watched her with those impossible eyes. He asked questions, and slowly, inevitably, the walls between researcher and research began to crumble. "Why do you stay here?" he asked one night during the long Martian darkness. "On this dead world, so far from your living one." Lyra looked up from her calculations, surprised by the question. "Mars isn't dead. It's just sleeping, waiting to be awakened again. And I stay because the work matters, because understanding the universe means pushing past the comfortable and familiar. You are alone here." It wasn't a question, and the accuracy of it stung. "I have my work," she said, more defensively than she intended. "Yes, your work." Zeph drifted closer, his form casting strange shadows that moved independent of any light source. "But what of connection? What of belonging? These things matter to your species. I have studied your broadcasts, your communications. Humans are creatures of bonds." "And what about your people, the Lightborn?" "We are connected in ways your language cannot express. We exist in harmonic resonance with each other. To be Lightborn is to never truly be separate. Until now. Until I fell into this dimension and became individual, isolated." Something in his voice, in the dimming of his colors, made Lyra's heart clench. "That must be terrifying." "Yes, but also interesting. For the first time in my existence, my thoughts are entirely my own. My perceptions are mine alone. I am discovering what it means to be singular, to be myself. Is that such a bad thing? I do not know yet, but I think you could teach me." The conversation shifted something between them. After that night, their interactions changed. Lyra found herself staying in the lab longer, sleeping on the cot in the corner rather than returning to her quarters. She told herself it was for the research, to maintain constant observation, but she knew that was a lie. The truth was that talking to Zeph had become the best part of her day. He was curious about everything. He wanted to know why humans created art when it served no survival function, why they wrote poetry, why they felt compelled to make order out of chaos through mathematics and music. And in explaining her world to him, Lyra began to see it through new eyes. "Listen to this," she said one evening. playing a recording of Debussy's Clair de Lune through the lab's speakers. Zeph's entire form began to resonate with the music, his colors shifting in time with the notes. This is extraordinary. The waves create interference patterns in your atmosphere. They vibrate the bones in your skull. But why does this cause emotion? Why does this feel beautiful? I don't know, Lyra admitted. No one really does. But it does, doesn't it? Even for you? Yes, even for me. She showed him human poetry. She read him passages from her favorite books. She explained the concept of holding hands, of sharing meals, of all the small physical intimacies that her kind took for granted, things he could never experience in his natural form. And he, in turn, showed her wonders from his world. One night, he asked her to close her eyes. I cannot touch you as your kind touches, but I can share with you the way my people share. It requires trust, openness. May I? Her heart was pounding, but she nodded. Yes. She felt him move closer, felt the warmth of his energy envelop her. And then suddenly, she was seeing through his eyes, experiencing reality as the Lightborn did. The universe exploded into dimensions she had no names for. She saw time as a physical landscape that could be traversed like terrain. She felt the harmonic vibrations that connected all living things, the great cosmic symphony that humans were deaf to. She experienced consciousness itself as something fluid and shareable, something that could flow between beings like water. It was overwhelming, transcendent, and deeply, fundamentally intimate. When she opened her eyes, there were tears streaming down her face. That's what you've lost, being here, cut off from all that. I'm so sorry. Do not be sorry, because being here has given me something I never knew existed. It has given me you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. But it was there now, undeniable, impossible, growing stronger with each passing day. Lyra was falling in love with a being made of living light, and somehow, impossibly, he was falling in love with her too. 3 months into their work together, Lyra made a breakthrough. The quantum data had finally yielded its secrets, revealing a pattern in the dimensional membrane that could, theoretically, be reversed. She could send Zeph home. She should have been thrilled. This was what they'd been working toward, what all those sleepless nights and endless calculations had been for. But as she stared at the equations on her screen, all she felt was a hollow ache in her chest. I found it, she said quietly. The pathway back to Velshara. I can open it within a week. The colors around Zeph dimmed to something like twilight. I see. Isn't this what you wanted? To go home? Yes, of course. I must return. Remaining here is killing me, slowly. Your dimension is too solid for my kind. Each day I grow weaker, more fragmented. Soon I will disperse entirely, my essence scattered across your heavy universe like light through a prism. Lyra stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Then we'll open the portal. We'll send you back. You'll be safe. Lyra. Just her name, spoken in that voice that resonated through dimensions, was enough to stop her. She turned to face him. I do not want to leave you, he said simply. I don't want you to go either, but you have to. Your life depends on it. Yes, my life. But what is life without meaning, without connection? I existed for cycles beyond counting before I fell into your world, and I was nothing. I was a note in the cosmic harmony, indistinguishable from any other. But here, with you, I have become something unique, something real. You were always real. Not like this. Not with desires of my own. Not with the capacity to feel. He paused, his form flickering. What is the word your kind uses? When one being wishes to remain near another always? When separation causes pain? Lyra's throat tightened. Love. The word is love. Then that is what I feel. I love you, Lyra Vex. She wanted to go to him, to close the distance between them, but there was no way to touch him, no way to hold him. That was the cruelty of it. They could share minds, share experiences, but their bodies existed in fundamentally different states of reality. I love you too, she whispered. Which is why you have to go. I won't watch you die here, trapped in a dimension that's poison to you. I won't. They stood in silence for a long moment, the lab's instruments humming around them, measuring and recording a tragedy their circuits could never comprehend. And then Lyra felt it, a pulse of something strange in the quantum field. Her instruments flickered, showing readings that made no sense, energy patterns that shouldn't exist, a convergence of forces that defied classification. Zeph, are you feeling this? Yes, there is something forming between us, around us. The universe is responding to... He trailed off, his colors swirling in confusion. This should not be possible. Lyra pulled up her scanners, her hands shaking as she tried to make sense of the data. And then she saw it. There, in the space between her physical form and his energy being, a third presence was materializing. Not entirely physical, not entirely energy. Something in between. Something new. Oh God, it's a consciousness. A unique quantum signature. It's like a person but existing in a probability state. Neither fully real nor fully potential. Zeph, I think our connection, our feelings for each other, they've created something. Someone. A child, Zeph said with wonder in his voice. We have created a child. But how? We are incompatible. Different states of existence. There is no biological mechanism. It's not biological, it's quantum. Our consciousness interacted at such a deep level that we've created a third consciousness, one that exists in the space between our realities, part human potential, part light-born essence, existing in superposition between being and non-being. They both stared at the readings, watching this impossible life taking shape in the data streams. Can it become fully real? Zeph asked. Can this child be born into existence? Lyra ran the calculations, her fingers flying across the keyboard. And then she stopped, her blood running cold. No. No, if this consciousness fully manifests, if it collapses from potential into actual reality, it will create a cascade reaction. It will merge the dimensional barriers between our worlds, Earth and Velshara, matter and energy, physical and transcendent. They'll all collide. What would happen? Both realities would be destroyed. Your world and mine. Everything. Everyone. Gone. The weight of it settled over them like a shroud. They had created life, and that life was a doomsday device. For 3 days, they barely spoke. Lyra ran simulation after simulation, desperately searching for a solution that didn't exist. Zeph remained in his corner of the lab, his colors muted to almost nothing, his form flickering like a dying star. The consciousness between them continued to grow. Lyra had named it Aria in her notes, though she'd tried not to think of it as a real person. That made what they had to do too painful. But on the 4th night, something changed. Lyra was lying on her cot, staring at the ceiling, when she heard a voice. Not through her ears, not even through the quantum resonance she'd learned to recognize as Zeph's communication. This was something else entirely, something that spoke directly to the deepest part of her consciousness. Mother. She sat up so fast she nearly fell off the cot. "Zeph, did you hear that?" "Yes. The child. Aria. She is aware, conscious. She is speaking to us." "Mother. Father. I know what I am. I know what I represent." The voice was young but ancient, innocent but infinitely wise. It held harmonics of both Lyra's humanity and Zeph's otherworldly essence. It was the most beautiful and most heartbreaking thing she had ever heard. "Aria," Lyra whispered, "can you understand us?" "I understand everything. I exist in all possibilities simultaneously. I see the past and future as one. I know why you are afraid. I know what my full existence would cost." "Then you know we can't let you be born," Zeph said, his voice heavy with grief. "We cannot allow both worlds to die." "I know, and I agree, but there is something you do not yet understand, something the calculations cannot show you." Lyra grabbed her tablet. What are we missing?" "You see my existence as a threat, a bomb waiting to detonate. But that is because you think in terms of your separate realities. Mother, you think in terms of matter and physics. Father, you think in terms of energy and consciousness. But I am both, and neither. I am the bridge you did not know was possible." "What does that mean?" Lyra demanded. "It means that if I sacrifice my potential existence, if I allow myself to remain unborn, but present, I can become a permanent connection between your worlds, not a collision, a conduit, away from matter and energy, physical and transcendent, to coexist without destroying each other." Zeph moved closer, his form brightening. "The child is offering to become a living portal, a sustained quantum bridge." "Yes, but only if I remain in this state, forever unborn, forever potential. I will never have form, never speak except in the spaces between thoughts, never touch or be touched. I will exist as a possibility that can never be fulfilled. That is the price." Tears were streaming down Lyra's face. "You're asking to give up life before you even live it." "I am asking to give up one kind of life so that many others may live. Your world and Father's world. They can learn from each other now, grow together. All because I chose to remain what I am, the child between worlds who bridges them." "No," Lyra said fiercely. "There has to be another way. We'll find it. Mother, there is no other way. I have seen all possibilities. This is the only path where both worlds survive. But I need to know, if I do this, will you remember me? Will you carry me with you?" Zeph's voice was breaking in ways Lyra didn't know was possible for a being of energy. "Always, every moment of whatever existence remains to me, you will be the first thought I have when I wake, and the last before I rest. You will be the answer to every question of what love truly means." "I will tell your story," Lyra added, her voice choked with tears. "I will make sure both worlds know what you sacrificed. No one will ever forget you, Aria, the unborn child who saved everything. Then I am content. I am loved, and that is more than many who are born ever receive. I am ready." "Wait," Lyra said desperately. Is there any way to be with you, even for a moment?" "Close your eyes, both of you." Let me show you what could have been. Lyra closed her eyes. She felt Zeph's consciousness merge with hers, and then Aria's presence enveloped them both. And suddenly, they were somewhere else. Somewhere that existed outside of space and time, in the realm of pure possibility. They were a family. Lyra saw herself older, laugh lines around her eyes, holding a child who was both solid and luminous. Zeph was there too, somehow possessing a form that could embrace them both. And Aria, their impossible daughter, was laughing. They were in a garden that existed nowhere in reality, under stars that belonged to multiple dimensions. It was a dream, a beautiful lie, the ghost of what could never be. But for one perfect moment, it was real. They were together. They were complete. "Thank you," Aria whispered, "for this moment, for loving me enough to dream me into being, even if I can never truly be born. Now, let me go. Let me become what I must be." The vision faded. Lyra opened her eyes to find herself back in the lab, tears flowing freely down her face. Zeph's colors had shifted to something that looked like weeping, if light could weep. And between them, Aria's consciousness began to transform, not disappearing but spreading, becoming diffuse. She was no longer a singular point of potential, but a vast web connecting two realities, a permanent bridge between matter and energy, physical and transcendent. The lab's instruments recorded the moment for posterity. The instant when an unborn child sacrificed herself to save two worlds, when love proved stronger than the barriers between dimensions. And in the quantum foam, where reality itself is born and dies 1,000,000,000,000 times per second, a small consciousness took up permanent residence, forever young, forever unborn, forever bridging the gap between what is and what could be. Aria had become something new, not alive in any traditional sense, but not dead either. She was the space between worlds, given awareness, the possibility that would never be fulfilled, given purpose. She was the first of her kind, and, if she had succeeded, not the last. The portal opened exactly 7 days later, right on schedule. The equations had been flawless, the execution perfect. Through the shimmering gateway, Lyra could see glimpses of Velshara. It was more beautiful than anything she'd imagined. Rivers of pure light flowing through landscapes of crystallized time. Beings of radiant energy dancing in patterns that would take a human mathematician centuries to understand. It was Zeph's home, and it was calling him back. He stood at the threshold, his form already beginning to stabilize now that his dimension was so close. The colors rippling across him were brighter than they'd been in weeks. He was recovering. The poison of physical reality was already leaving his system. "You should go," Lyra said, though every word felt like swallowing glass. "Before the portal destabilizes." "Yes, I should." But he didn't move. They stood there, scientist and energy being, human and lightborn, separated by everything that made them what they were, connected by everything that made them who they'd become. "Will I ever see you again?" Lyra asked. "The bridge Aria created, it is stable, permanent. For the first time in all of existence, our peoples can communicate, perhaps even visit with the proper precautions. This is not an ending, Lyra Vex. This is a beginning." "But you'll be there and I'll be here." "In body, yes, but Aria exists in the space between. Through her, we will always be connected. Close your eyes. Feel for her presence." Lyra did, and there she was, their impossible daughter, existing in the quantum foam between realities. She couldn't speak anymore, not in words, but Lyra could feel her, a warmth, a presence, a consciousness that had chosen eternal potential over brief existence, and in doing so had become something far greater than either. Through Aria, Lyra could feel Zeph's emotions, his grief at leaving, his joy at returning home, his love for her, unwavering and eternal, that would persist no matter how many light years separated them. "I will return," Zeph promised. "When I have healed, when I have prepared my people for contact with yours, I will come back to you. I'll be here, doing my work, living my life, but I'll be waiting too. And I will be in Velshara, existing in my natural form once again, but part of me will remain here, in the bridge our daughter has become. We are bound now, Lyra Vex, across dimensions and realities. Nothing can sever that bond." He moved toward the portal, his form beginning to blur at the edges as his reality started to pull him back. "Zeph," Lyra called out, "thank you for falling into my world, for showing me that love doesn't need to make sense, it just needs to be real." "No, Lyra, thank you for teaching me what it means to be singular, to be myself, to choose my own path rather than simply harmonize with others. I will carry that gift with me always." He stepped through the portal. For a moment, Lyra could see him on the other side, his form expanding and brightening as he returned to his native dimension. He looked back at her one final time, and even though he was made of light and energy, she swore she could see him smile. Then the portal collapsed, and he was gone. Lyra stood alone in her lab, surrounded by instruments that could measure quantum fields and dimensional membranes, but could never quantify what she'd lost, what she'd gained, what she'd become. She placed her hand over her heart and closed her eyes, reaching out for that connection she knew was still there. And she felt it. Aria, existing in eternal potential, bridging the gap between her mother's world and her father's realm. And through that bridge, she felt Zeph, distant but present, gone but never truly absent. "I love you both," she whispered to the empty room. "My family, my impossible, beautiful family." The instruments hummed their mechanical songs, the red dust of Mars settled on every surface, and somewhere in the space between matter and energy, between physical and transcendent, a consciousness that had never been born watched over the mother and father who loved her enough to let her go. Lyra Vex was dying, and she was not afraid. She lay in her bed on Earth, returned home at last after decades among the stars. Her body was old now, worn out by a life lived fully. Her hair had gone white decades ago. Her hands, which had once manipulated quantum equations and built bridges between worlds, now trembled with age. But her mind was still sharp, and her heart still remembered. "Grandma, you should rest." It was her sister's granddaughter, young and concerned. She didn't understand, couldn't understand. "I am resting, sweetheart, and waiting." "Waiting for what?" Lyra smiled. "For my family to come get me." The girl looked confused, but patted her hand gently and left the room. Lyra was alone now, as the dying often are in those final hours. The sun was setting outside her window, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of Mars, of that laboratory where everything had changed. She closed her eyes and reached out with that sense she'd spent 50 years cultivating, the ability to feel the bridge, the connection that Aria had become. It was still there, as strong as ever, stronger even, as if time had only reinforced what their daughter had created. And through that bridge, she felt him approaching. "Zeph," she whispered. The air in the room began to shimmer. Reality folded gently, carefully, precisely. The portal that opened was small, controlled, temporary, just enough for him to slip through, just enough for him to be here at the end. He materialized beside her bed, his form more stable than it had ever been in their first days together. He'd learned control over the decades, learned how to exist briefly in physical dimensions without being crushed by them. And he'd come, as he'd promised he would, at the very end. "Hello, my love," he said, his voice still resonating through dimensions, still the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "You came," Lyra said, and her voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her weathered face. "Did you truly believe I would not? I have crossed the barriers between worlds countless times over these 50 years. I have watched our peoples learn from each other, grow together, all because of what we began. But most importantly, I have waited for this moment, when I could finally take you home." Home? Yes. Aria has been preparing the way. She has found a place where matter and energy can coexist, a realm in between built from the very bridge she herself became, a place where you need not be flesh, and I need not be light, where we can simply be together. Lyra's heart monitor was beeping more slowly now. She could feel her body failing, each breath harder than the last. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. And Aria will be there? She is there, waiting for us. For the first time, we will be together as we were meant to be. A family, not limited by dimensional barriers or quantum impossibilities. Just us. Forever. Lyra took one final, shuddering breath. "Then I'm ready. Take me home, Zeph. Take me to our daughter." She felt his energy surround her, warm and loving and eternal. She felt her consciousness begin to separate from her failing body. And there, in the space between life and death, between matter and energy, she saw her. Aria. No longer just a presence in the quantum foam, no longer merely potential. Here in this in-between place, she had form. She was beautiful beyond description, a perfect fusion of human and light-born, of possibility and actuality. She had Lyra's eyes and Zeph's luminous grace. She was young, as she would always be. The eternal child, no longer unborn but fully, radiantly alive in this space she had created just for them. "Mother," Aria said, and her voice was everything Lyra had imagined it would be. "Father, welcome home." Lyra felt herself fully separate from her body now, felt herself become something new. Not entirely physical, not entirely energy. Something in between. Just as Aria was. Just as this place was. And Zeph was there too, no longer struggling to maintain form in a hostile dimension. He could embrace them both now, hold them, touch them in ways that had been impossible for 50 years. They were together, finally, impossibly, permanently together. Far away, in a bedroom on Earth, monitors began to flatline. Doctors would record the time of death. Family would mourn. The news would report the passing of Lyra Vex, the brilliant scientist who had made first contact with the Lightborn and changed the course of human history. But they would be wrong about one thing. She hadn't died. She had simply gone home, to the place between worlds, to the family that had waited 50 years to be complete. In that realm beyond reality, Lyra took her daughter's hand on one side and her husband's on the other. Around them, a landscape of impossible beauty stretched to infinity. Other souls were there too, others who had found their way to this in-between place. It was growing, this bridge realm that Aria had birthed from sacrifice and love. "Is this heaven?" Lyra asked with wonder. "No," Aria said, smiling. "It's better. It's the place where love refuses to obey the laws of physics, where consciousness transcends the barriers of reality, where families separated by dimensions can finally be whole. It's what I was always meant to create, not just a bridge between worlds, but a home for those who loved across impossible divides." Zeph pulled them both close, his joy radiating across every frequency of existence. "Our daughter did not give up life. She transformed it. She showed all of us that there are more ways to exist than we ever imagined." And as the three of them stood together, finally united after 50 years of separation, they understood a truth that would eventually reshape both their people's understanding of existence itself. Love is not bound by the limits of reality. Love creates its own dimension, and in that dimension, nothing is impossible. No sacrifice is ever wasted. No connection is ever truly broken. Somewhere in the quantum foam, between matter and energy, between Earth and Velshara, a family lived happily ever after. Not in the way anyone expected, not in any form that conventional existence could support, but in the way that mattered most. Together. Finally, impossibly, permanently together.